The Pleasant View Heritage Foundation, our goal is to try and share some history, one, that we don't forget it, but two, that we'll appreciate a little bit more where we came from and why we're here. Whether I grew up in North Ogden, and so I kind of inherited the city, but many of you might have DNA that goes back a ways, maybe even to some of the Native Americans we're going to talk about tonight. But we hope that that helps you feel the value of the city. Holly and Curtis Fuller, they work over at the North Ogden Museum, as you'll see tonight, they have helped us with. And I don't know if you've seen any of their books, but they do an awesome job on the pictorial histories of the northern Weber County area. This one other thing, we try to do a quarterly like this. This one, of course, we thought that maybe trails going clear back to the antediluvian almost. Anyway, long time ago, and how those evolved into some roads and then some rails, and then talk about the future of the transportation of Pleasant View along the way. Our first presenter will be Jo Harline, and he's going to be introduced by his wife after Jo gets finished. We're going to try and take about 20 minutes or 30 each of us. After Jo finishes, then I'll talk about the roads that evolved after that. And then we have actually a conductor of the old Pleasant View trolley. He is going to tell us about the Pleasant View trolley and when it started and how long it existed and all kind of shenanigans that went on along the way. So, Jo, thank you.
So I'm Little Joe, and that's Big Joe. Since I've known him about 40 years, I know a few things about him. He was born and raised in Ogden, and he went to Ogden High. He went to Weber State and got a BA in geography. And when I met him, he's just always been obsessed with maps. Of course, he likes, like some of you probably, go on Google Maps and do all that stuff online. And he's just fascinated with that, with geography, with the landscape, with how the Earth was formed, basically. He likes geology as well, fossils, stuff like that. So his big interest, besides that, he's helped me for the past 20-something years, helping me hike around to document the archaeological sites that we've been able to file and document. He's gone out a lot just to show, how this landscape here and this area where he grew up here, how this was formed from Lake Bonneville down to here. And so he studied the early explorers and trappers, explored the early history, learned a lot about one of his heroes, Fremont, and who was one of the educated scientists of his day. And so here's Jo to tell you more about history here.
So think about the last 200 years of history in the Great Salt Lake area or here in Pleasant View. Did you know that 65 times 200 years is about 13,000 years of prehistory? That goes a long way. And the archaeological record lets you time travel pieces of that 13,000, plus a bit more in our area. Some bits and pieces even reach back to 14,500 years ago. I get that information from Steve Sims. He's an archaeology professor at Utah State University. He's retired. He just wrote this book in 2023, First Peoples of the Great Salt Lake, and one of my favorites. Jerry owns this book too. So let me see. Let's see. I'm going to read from page 13. He says, by 14,500 years ago, Lake Bonneville still stood at an elevation around 4,475 feet. And that's this right here. That. And the valleys along the Wasatch Front remain largely inundated. So there is increasing evidence that humanity had spread widely across the Western Hemisphere, albeit sparsely and in fits and starts. We have firm evidence that by 13,000 years ago, people had been living around Great Salt Lake for several centuries. Dr. Sims adds, like 75 human generations may have lived their lives along these levels of Lake Bonneville. So that's what he's talking about is from there to there, 75 generations. And that's the top of Lake Bonneville right there, but humans were starting at about 14,500 right there. And then around 13,000, that's when it was at 42 right there. So just to, let's see. So take note that the hot springs are at an elevation of 4260. So 42 is about where the lake level was at 13,000 years ago. So the hot springs were underwater for much of the time before that. So what I did, I found a contour line at 4460, which is close to 4475, and I drew it on this map right here. And so about 14,500 years ago, that's where the lake level was. And so, okay. And then over about 13,000 years ago, it was down 4460, which is below the hot springs somewhere. So so where would you be walking? Where would the trails be? They'd be about right in here somewhere in Pleasant View. That's the only option. Right where we're sitting would have been the only route, and between the lake and the mountains is the only option unless you build a reed boat and float on the water, which I think they did. And so in Pleasant View and North Ogden, some very old paleo and archaic artifacts like crescents and western stem points have been found above this contour line. Those are the oldest that usually appear in the record. And so in May of 2020, if you might remember, Mark Stewart talked to us in one of these meetings, and I would suggest that you look it up and read it again, because it covers quite a bit of prehistory for this area too. So now, I wanted to show you a close-up of this. So we are right here, beachfront property, and then let's see, my house is right here, and Jerry's house is right there underwater. I like that. Okay. I'm going to tell you two concepts that you got to keep in mind with trails, and it's first concept is about paths and probable routes. In the Utah Historical Quarterly, there was a guy who wrote about them here. I'm going to read a little bit of it. When one reads about old trails used by traders and explorers, it's natural to think of a single trail, as with the Oregon Trail or Spanish Trail, for example. However, one must keep in mind there was seldom just a single path between certain points. On the contrary, there was usually a network of trails which formed a virtual highway system, trails that met at certain key points such as river crossings and mountain passes, and then they diverged again after those. And then the second concept, this is up in Pleasant View where we are right here, somewhere above us a little bit. The second concept is how little we have record of. And this is a quote from Del Morgan, who was a Utah historian. So he describes the scant historical record, and he describes it as proto-historic period. And he thinks that's probably 1813 on back for this area. And he says it's not a very extended record we have to work with. And unfortunately, the prospects are not very bright that scholarly ingenuity will significantly enlarge that record. So there's about 28 years from 1813 to the time the Mormons got here where some records were kept. And that's what I'm going on tonight. Fortunately, there were a few. So let's see. Okay, and there's another. I made it black and white. It's not an old one. So, okay. Now I'm going to cover a historical reference to a plainly beaten trail through Willard and Pleasant View. John Fremont kept good records, and he was here September 1843. He came into Utah up by Evanston and went up the Bear River to Soda Springs. He told some of his crew to go to Fort Hall while he and a handful came down here to the lake. And so he got to one they called Clear Creek, which is Willard Creek, because I figured that out because it's 7 miles from the hot springs. And then he writes, "We continued our way along the mountain, having found here a broad, plainly beaten trail." And then he talks about the hot springs, and he says he measured the temperature, and he measured all kinds of things about it, like 136 in one pool, 132.5 in another pool, and he says there were about 12 of them. And then the stream that came out of it, he grabbed some mud, and he figured out that it was mostly lime and iron and magnesia, sodium, alumina, water, and loess. And that's pretty detailed. And that's one reason why Jo Lynn called him my hero. But he had a personality that was kind of both good and bad to me. But his record keeping was great. So. He quoting again from Fremont, he said, "At this place, the trail we had been following turned to the left, apparently with the view of entering a gorge in the mountain, from which issued the principal fork of a large and comparatively well-timbered stream called Weber's Fork." He knew that because the mountain men were here before him in the 20s and 30s. And accordingly, he turned off towards the lake. And the reason why he did that was because he wasn't interested in Pleasant View. He wanted to go to the lake because it was a big mystery to him. That was the main reason for this little partial crew to come down here. And as you know, that he went out to Fremont Island. And so but right here, he says that there was a left turn at the hot springs, and so that's the only way. Like, he's going this way, and then at the hot springs you go left, and then that was a plainly beaten trail up around this way, and so that's evidence that it was there in 1843 when he was here. So they camped over on the Weber River, and then they went out to the lake. So let's see. Okay, now I'm going to show you some Native American trails that I know about in the history records. And this is North Ogden Canyon right here. And everybody knows that. So this is the marker at the top of North Ogden Divide, which was put up partially by, my cousin Mike Crookston helped build that, and some of his family too. And that tells about the trails. Like that's North Ogden Canyon right there, and 2 was Liberty to Avon, and 4 was Trapper's Loop, and then this one went up South Fork like that. And
Joe, you might mention that was an Eagle Scout project.
for Mike, yeah. And he said it was hard work. So, and then we know of a trail that's it's called Indian Trail today even. It goes on the south side of Ogden Canyon. There's Trapper's Loop and the one going up South Fork. I didn't do the trail like that or that because they could have gone anywhere easily. Like I read earlier, there's constrictions where they had to go. A route is a better term than a trail in my mind. So then this one is Liberty to Avon, and that one is Brigham City to Manaway Reservoir. And then this is called Indian Trail Hollow if you look it up on Google. And they come out at Avon right there. And then from Avon, they'd keep on going up to Porcupine Dam, Scare Canyon maybe, or Cinnamon Creek. And they'd get up to Ant Flats, Hardware Ranch, keep on going up to Bear Lake like that. Or they'd take off on the flat like that. This is a Indian Trail Road in Manaway. There's houses on that street and everything. So, and that's Manaway from the pass that they went over.
Well, we hiked all the way up to that pass right there from the bottom parking lot down by the hill.
Yeah, we hiked from here up, and it's a city watershed, so it's okay for people to do that. But right where we are right here, it starts private property beyond that, so we didn't go down. Okay, I'm gonna hold on that, and let's see. I'd like to, let's see. I have a great record of Native American trails close to our area. That's in, I got this off of the website called An Early History of Cache County, Paradise Spring of 1860. This may also help us understand early Pleasant View better. So since I don't have something to go by right here, historically, I thought I'd borrow theirs, and maybe that would help us understand our area. So, so the little Mormon colony returned soon to Cache Valley and located where Avon is now situated, and commenced to building their log houses. And the utmost vigilance was necessary to protect themselves and their property from the Indians. The location for the settlement had its disadvantages, as it was so far away from larger settlements in the valley, and was one of the chief camping grounds of the Indians on their way to the south and east. It was right at the forks of the Indian Trail through East Canyon that connected with points in Wyoming and with the trail to Ogden, Salt Lake, and other parts of Utah. And Chief Washakie and his tribe, as well as other tribes, must have traveled a good deal in and out of the valley over these routes. Therefore, the site served as a junction and was a suitable camping place for the Indians. The fishing and hunting were exceptionally good, as several canyons with streams of water were so near at hand. Because of these conditions, the place was not the best for a settlement at this time. And in 1867 and 68, Chief Wakara was giving him heck in Utah, mostly down south, but they were worried about it up there too. And so what they did, they completely moved the whole settlement of Paradise from the Avon area up to 3 miles north to where Paradise sits today. And then now Avon is where Paradise used to be. And so Jerry is going to show you a map of early Pleasant View. And when he does, notice the teepee symbols for Indian settlers. And it was Indian encampments, I think, is what his map may show. And some of you are already familiar with it. It's on the wall in the hallway too, out there. And so a couple of years ago, Jo Lynn told you about this rock art. And the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone call this Sogo Timboya, which is Earth Rock Path. In 2009, Jo Lynn and I found this petroglyph in Willard, below the canal between Cook Canyon and Holmes Canyon. When the power poles went in, we had the construction crews protect it and other petroglyphs with orange fencing. Years later, we learned houses were going in. In 2023, a test trench went in right next to the petroglyph. I went to talk with Bryce Wheelwright at Willard City offices, and the petroglyph got immediate protection again. Willard City and the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone decided to move the petroglyph to the Willard Pioneer Cemetery. I understand Willard City paid for moving the petroglyph boulder, but they had to wait in the spring of 2024 till the ground was hard enough to get the truck in there. And they also had to cut the boulder. See the big cut it? They did it in there. And then to take it out of there. And so that's what is, then the rock had a tarp on it for a few months in the cemetery while the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone got a historical marker ready. That one right there. And this is the historical marker for that. That's right by the Rock Waterfall on Highway 89 in Willard. That's the Pioneer Cemetery. And my, what is it, great-great-great-grandmother is buried there too? Fourth? Yeah, so. And then, so it says 2022. That's either a mistake or it could refer to the time when subdivision plans were filed or something like that. So I'm going to read what this says. Sogo Timboya. Sogo means earth, land, dirt, or ground. Timp means stone or mouth. And you can look this up. There's a Shoshone dictionary online. It's put out by the University of Utah. And I did that. So they spell, in the Shoshone dictionary, the Boya is spelled B-O-I. And that means road, roam, path, or trail. So Earth Rock Path. The petroglyph representing the Sogo Timboya Earth Rock Path was displaced from the face of the mountain to the east in the fall of 2022. The Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation and the community of Willard worked together to place the stone in a location respectful to the tribe's ancestors who created it. The northwestern band of the Shoshone followed their ancestral hunting and gathering migration routes, traveling along the base of the Wasatch Mountain peaks along the Great Salt Lake. And I looked up TSISIPA, CCPA, and that means, what do you think? Great Salt Lake. That's what it means.